I hadn't seen this place in over 30 years, but the road leading here still felt the same. That narrow stretch of dusty gravel winding between cornfields, the kind of road where time just slows itself down whether you like it or not. I eased the car over by the old fence line and killed the engine. And there it was, the gate, leaning a little to the right now, gray and tired from all the years, but still standing strong. The same one my granddad built with his own 2 hands. 2 thick cedar posts, beaten by 1,000 storms, and a latch that still clicked shut like a heartbeat. When I stepped out, the air wrapped around me like an old friend, warm, gentle, and a little sweet. The smell of hay and honeysuckle drifted through the breeze. Out in the fields, the tall stalks of corn swayed slow and easy, just like they used to when I was a kid. I pushed the gate open, and the hinges groaned in that same stubborn way they always did. That deep, familiar creak that somehow hits you right in the chest. Funny how some sounds don't just stay in your memory. They live in your bones. That gate had always sung the same tune. Low, tired, but steady. A reminder that things built with care tend to outlast the people who made them. I ran my hand along the top rail, feeling the rough wood under my palm. The nails were rusted, the board splintered in spots, but they were still holding on, the same way my granddad held this family together. Quietly, steady, never saying much about it, just doing. When I was little, he used to stand right here, leaning against that gate with one boot crossed over the other, watching the sun drop behind the trees. He'd hook his thumb in his belt loop and say, "Ain't nothing more honest than evening light." I didn't get it then. I just liked the sound of his voice, slow, deep, like the land itself was speaking through him. The old farmhouse sat beyond the oaks, half hidden in their shade. The white paint had faded to a soft gray. The porch sagged a little on one side, but it still looked like home. The kind of home that waits for you, no matter how long you've been gone. The fields were quiet now. The tractors long since parked, the barn patched with tin, the old well pump still standing tall beside the shed. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. I guess that's what happens with age. The world doesn't really shrink. You just grow past it. Then one day, you circle back and realize how much it shaped you. The wind picked up, soft at first, then steady. It moved through the tall grass and set the gate rocking, the latch tapping gently against the post. For a second, I could almost see him there again, my granddad, his shadow caught in that golden light, his hat tilted low, that half smile he wore when he caught me staring. I used to follow him everywhere. He didn't talk much, but when he did, you remembered every word. Everything worth keeping needs tending, he'd say. Fences, friendships, and the truth. Back then, I didn't have a clue what he meant, but I do now. Sometimes, it's not what a person leaves behind that matters. It's how they leave you seeing the world. I leaned against the gate the same way he used to. The wood creaked under my weight. I looked out over those fields, and it felt like time folded in on itself. The kid I was and the man I'd become standing there together in the same breath of wind. You don't realize how much a place lives inside you until you come back. The smell, the sound, the light, they reach right in and wake something that's been sleeping for years. The last time I walked through this gate was after his funeral. I still remember that day, the pale, cold sun, the heavy quiet that followed us up the drive. But now, that silence feels softer, not empty, just patient. I looked at the latch one last time. It was worn smooth by decades of hands, my granddad's, my dad's, my own. Generations holding the same piece of wood. That's what legacy really is, I think. Not grand gestures or big stories. Just quiet hands doing the same simple thing over and over, because love taught them to. I took a deep breath and stepped through. The grass brushed my jeans. The air was warm on my face. The gate swung shut behind me, the latch catching with that soft, familiar click, the same old rhythm, untouched by time. And just like that, I was home again. Morning rolled in quiet, same way it always used to on the farm. Soft sunlight spilling through the trees, the hum of summer bugs already tuning up, and that smell, fresh-cut grass mixed with warm earth. Funny how a smell like that can hold you back decades in just one breath. That scent was my childhood. It meant summer wasn't coming. It was here to stay. I must have been 10, maybe 11, when Grandpa first let me ride the mower with him. The old John Deere would sputter and cough like it hadn't had its coffee yet, and he'd pat the seat beside him, grin a little, and say, "Hop on, partner, let's make her sing." We'd roll that long stretch of yard between the porch and the fence line, the air thick with that green, sweet smell of clippings. Grass would stick to my shins, and I'd laugh when the wind from the blades whipped past. Grandpa didn't talk much, but every now and then he'd glance over and give me that small grin of his, the kind that said everything without saying a word. He had a way of turning chores into something peaceful. While other kids were talking about beach trips or heading to the city, my summers were made of mowing, painting, mending fences, feeding the hens. But to me, it never felt like work. It felt like belonging. He used to say, if you start your day smelling grass and end it listening to crickets, you're doing all right. I didn't realize it then, but he was teaching me how to love the simple things, the kind that keep your feet on the ground when the world starts spinning too fast. That morning, walking across the yard, I brushed my hand through the tall weeds that had taken over. The mower was long gone, but I could still hear it humming in the back of my mind. Feel the vibration in my legs, smell that cut grass hanging in the air like memory itself. Everything in that yard had a story. The old tire swing hanging from the oak, still swaying in the breeze. The patch of clover by the fence where I used to lie on my back and count clouds. The chipped watering can Grandma kept by the porch, still there. Somehow, catching rainwater and rust in equal measure. It hit me then, how we never noticed the last time we do something. The last time we run barefoot through the grass. The last time we ride shotgun on a mower beside someone we love. The last time we don't realize we're saying goodbye. Maybe that's the mercy of life. It gives us endings dressed up as ordinary days. Grandpa always started mowing early, before the sun got mean. Grandma would sit on the porch with her coffee, calling out reminders about lunch or the pie cooling on the windowsill. He'd tip his hat to her, that little move that somehow said I love you, I hear you, and I'll be right back, all at once. When I looked toward the porch now, I could almost see them, her hair pinned up, his overalls dusted with grass. Two lives so woven into this place that even time couldn't pull them apart. As a kid, I thought they'd always be there. Grown-ups felt immortal back then. Like the hills, like the trees. I never thought about the day when the mower would fall silent, the coffee cups would sit empty, and I'd be the only one left standing in that yard. Still, the air felt alive with them. I swear I could feel them everywhere. In the hum of the bees, the tilt of the swing, the whisper of wind through the grass. It wasn't haunting. It was comforting, like they were still tending things, just from a different side of the fence. I walked along the fence line where the grass grew wild and waist-high. Sunlight hit the blades in waves, each gust of wind showing flashes of gold under all that green. It looked like the earth was breathing, and somewhere deep inside, something in me loosened, a quiet kind of joy, born from remembering not just what I'd lost, but everything I'd been given. That smell, grass, dirt, morning air, it had always been there to remind me of beginnings. Every pass of the mower, every fresh cut, it was both an ending and a new start. That's how things worked out here. You took care of what needed tending, you fixed what was broken, and you trusted time to handle the rest. By midday, the sun was high, the air thick and shimmery with heat. I sat on the porch steps, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and looked out across the fields. The grass rolled in slow, lazy waves under the wind, the same rhythm I'd known since I was small. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a visitor. I felt like I belonged again. I thought about something Grandpa used to say. Grass will grow whether you cut it or not, but tending to it makes you part of its story. He wasn't just talking about mowing. He meant life. How it keeps moving forward, growing wild if you let it, and how all we can really do is show up, do our part, and take a minute to breathe in the good while it's fresh. As the sun leaned west, I stood and took one last slow look across that yard. The breeze softened, the grass shimmered like water, and the whole world seemed to hum along. That smell of cut grass, that was home, and somehow, it still was. The apple tree stood right where it always had, halfway between the house and the far fence, its branches hanging low and heavy with green fruit. Even after all these years, I could still remember the sound those apples made when they fell. A soft, solid thud against the date, followed by the rustle of grass and that low hum of bees doing their thing. That tree marked the edge of my childhood world. Everything that mattered was on this side. The house, the barn, the garden, the swing. Everything past it felt endless, mysterious, like the world just kept going forever. When I was a kid, Grandpa used to rest under that apple tree after a long morning's work. He'd settle into the grass, wipe his brow with that same old red handkerchief, then tilt his hat down over his eyes like he was done talking for the day. I'd lie right beside him, pretending to nap too, though I was way too busy watching clouds drift through the branches. He always noticed. "Don't try so hard to see everything at once," he'd say, voice lazy but sure. "Just let the world come to you." Took me years to understand that one. Back then, I thought he was talking about clouds. Now, I know he meant life. Beyond the apple tree lay the open field, a stretch of tall grass that danced in the wind, stretching all the way to the horizon until it just blurred into sky. I used to think it went on forever, and maybe, in its own way, it still does. That field was where our little adventures happened. I learned to fly kites out there, though most of them ended up tangled in power lines or disappearing into the clouds. I learned how to skip stones across the shallow creek that ran along the edge. And once, I learned what a wasp nest looked like the hard way. But what sticks with me most isn't what we did. It's how it felt to be there. There was a peace to that space, the kind that makes you feel small but infinite at the same time. The hum of crickets, the whisper of grass, the slow rhythm of the wind. It all came together like a song you didn't have to know the words to in order to understand. One afternoon, I asked Grandpa why he planted the apple tree right there, in the middle of everything. He looked at me for a good long moment before saying, "So we'd have a place to rest halfway through life." Then he smiled that slow, knowing smile of his. You don't get to the far side all at once. You stop, you breathe, you listen. Didn't mean much to me back then, but now, I get it. That tree wasn't just shade. It was a marker of time. Every spring, it bloomed. Every fall, it gave. Every winter, it stood bare, waiting. It was a quiet reminder that everything, even us, needs time to grow, time to fall, and time to rest. As I walked toward it now, the air was thick with the smell of ripening fruit and sun-warmed bark. A few apples had already dropped, lying half-hidden in the grass, some bruised, some still perfect. I bent down and picked one up. It was small, pale green, cool in my hand. I brushed it off on my shirt and took a bite. The taste hit instantly. Tart, crisp, alive. The same flavor that marked every harvest season of my childhood. That taste wasn't just memory. It was time itself, folded up in the skin of a single apple. I sat down beneath the tree like Grandpa used to, leaned back against the trunk, feeling the bark rough against my shoulders. The shade felt soft, almost forgiving. From there, I could see the whole field spread out before me, golden, quiet, familiar. I thought about how much had changed past that horizon since the last time I sat here. The towns that had grown, the people who'd gone, the years that had carried me far from this place. And yet, somehow, this view hadn't changed a bit. Same breeze, same hum of the earth turning underneath it all. It's funny, the world moves so damn fast, but this kind of stillness never forgets you. It waits, patient, unchanged, just waiting for you to remember how to be still again. I closed my eyes and listened. The grass brushed against itself. Another apple dropped somewhere close by. For a second, I could almost hear his voice again, calm and steady, like the earth itself was talking through him. "Don't rush your days." "What?" he'd say. "The wind doesn't." I smiled at that. He always had a way of making time feel like an old friend instead of an enemy. The afternoon light deepened, and the field beyond the apple tree shimmered like it was breathing. The wind moved across it in slow waves, bending everything in one direction, then another, like the world was nodding along to something only it could hear. That's what this place was, a quiet agreement between the past and the present, between who I was and who I'd become. Sitting there, I realized that maybe growing older isn't about getting farther from where you started. Maybe it's about circling back with a new kind of understanding. The leaves above me rustled, tossing bits of sunlight across my hands. I finished the apple, tossed the core into the grass, and watched it vanish into the shade. It struck me how simple life really is when you let it be. Just wind, grass, and one strong old tree still standing between what was and what will be. The field beyond the apple tree stretched into that soft, late summer haze. I knew it hadn't really changed. Not the land, not the sky, not even the rhythm of the breeze. What changed was me, finally ready to see it again the way he always did. And when the wind swept through the branches, carrying that sweet apple scent across the yard, I could almost hear him say, "You stopped, didn't you? You listened." And this time, I truly had. There was a time when the porch was the heart of everything. Before screens, before that constant hum of wires and machines, the porch was where evenings lived. Soft lamplight spilling through the screen door, the smell of supper still hanging in the air, and that old wooden radio sitting proud on the wicker table like a faithful old friend. It wasn't much to look at. Scuffed oak casing, a cracked tuning dial, one brass knob that wobbled when you turned it. But to us, that radio was magic. When Granddad switched it on, the world seemed to hush, like even the night leaned in to listen. It always started the same way, a soft hiss of static, that trembling whisper that sounded like wind through pine needles. Then, bit by bit, the voices would come through, low, warm, far away, like they traveled 1,000 miles just to reach our porch. He'd sit in his old rocker, boards creaking in time with that slow, steady rhythm of his. I'd sit cross-legged at his feet, watching the faint orange glow behind the cloth screen. He'd nod to me when a favorite tune came on, and sometimes, if the mood hit just right, he'd hum along. There was one song, Moonlight Serenade. Lord, that song could quiet the whole world. I can still hear it now, floating soft and easy into the dark, too gentle to ever fully hold. He'd close his eyes, smile that quiet little smile, like he was remembering something, or someone, just out of reach. I once asked what he thought about when he heard that tune. He chuckled, that low rumble that made the chair creak. "About the things that made me who I am," he said, "and the things I still hope to be." Didn't make much sense to me back then, how someone his age could still be hoping for things. But now I get it. Hope doesn't just belong to the young. It just changes shape. It gets quieter, steadier, turns into this quiet kind of faith in tomorrow, even when tomorrow doesn't look the way it used to. That porch radio played every night that summer. The war had ended not long before, and the whole world was learning how to breathe again. Newsmen talked about rebuilding, about gas prices and the promise of better days. But out here, on our porch, none of that really mattered. What mattered was the rhythm of the night, crickets rising, the smell of Granddad's pipe, Glenn Miller floating through the dark. Sometimes neighbors would wander by, calling out a howdy. Sometimes Grandma would step out with a tray of lemonade, shaking her head at him for listening to those same old songs again. But she'd always stay a while, leaning on the rail, smiling when he reached over and turned the volume up just a notch. I remember how her laugh blended with the music, how her voice softened when she said his name. It's funny, I've forgotten a lot of things from those years. But not that. Not her voice. Not the way the porch light flickered on her hair like gold. Years later, when I found that old radio again, dusty and silent, tucked away in the attic, I brought it down and set it on my own porch. The wood was cracked deeper now, the brass dull with age, but it still had that quiet kind of dignity about it, like it was waiting to be useful again. I spent a whole afternoon cleaning it, tightening that wobbly knob, wiping years of dust off the dial. Didn't really expect it to work. I just wanted to touch it, you know? to feel connected to that porch long gone. But when I finally plugged it in, there it was. That faint, trembling static. That whisper of life coming back. It startled me. And then, like a ghost stepping through time, music began to play. Not perfectly. It wavered, faded in and out. But there it was, Moonlight Serenade. I just sat back and let it wash over me. The same tune, the same gentle swing of notes that once drifted through the night while I sat at Granddad's feet. For a few minutes, the distance between then and now just disappeared. The porch around me might have been new boards, new light, new years, but the feeling was the same. It was like the music itself remembered us. I thought about how many nights that song had probably played over the decades, in other homes, for other families, connecting folks who never met, but somehow shared the same ache, the same peace, the same quiet longing for something simple and beautiful. That's the thing about memory. It doesn't live just in our heads. It lingers in sound, in scent, in the way light falls across old wood. Sometimes, all it takes is one song to open every door you thought was closed for good. When the music finally faded and the static returned, I didn't turn it off. I just sat there, letting that soft hum fill the space, like the world whispering through time. The sun sank low, the sky shifting to that soft blue-gray of evening. I rocked slow in my chair, the air cooling around me, and I thought, maybe somewhere out there, Granddad's doing the same. And maybe that's what that old porch radio was really for. Not just for music, not for news, but for reminding us that no matter how far we drift, there's always a signal out there, waiting to find us again. And if you're quiet enough, you can still hear it. There are some summers that fade when the season ends, and then there are the ones that never really go. The kind that stay tucked somewhere deep inside you, waiting to be remembered. You can feel them in the bones of a warm afternoon, or in the way the air smells right before a storm rolls in. For me, it was the summer of '63, the one where everything felt possible. Time moved a little slower back then, just enough for us to believe it might always stay that way. Mornings came early. The world still felt young when the sun rose over the cornfields, painting everything in gold. Grandma would already be humming in the kitchen, the screen door clapping soft as she stepped out to hang the wash. You could smell the coffee drifting through the house, mixing with that wild honeysuckle growing along the fence. Grandpa would be out by the gate, fixing something that didn't really need fixing. A hinge, a latch, maybe a loose board on the post. Truth was, I think he just liked being near it. That gate had been there longer than I'd been alive, and he always said it'd still be standing long after he was gone. It wasn't just wooden nails, it was a piece of him. The way he'd lean on it, pipe in hand, looking out over the fields, that was his morning ritual, as steady as sunrise. When I was a kid, I used to sit on the porch steps and watch the dust rise off the gravel road, waiting for the sound of my buddies' bikes coming up the lane. We'd ride all day, down past the river, across the old bridge, through the tall grass fields where the wind moved like waves. Sometimes we'd stop at the ice house and spend the few coins we had on cold bottles of root beer, the glass kind that fizzed up and burned just a little in your throat. We thought we were explorers back then, even though our whole world fit into a few miles of dirt road and open sky. We found trails through the woods, skipped rocks on the slow part of the creek, and lay in the grass naming shapes in the clouds until the heat made us lazy and quiet. The only thing that ever seemed to move fast was time itself. The distant train whistle, the church bell at noon, the crickets starting their song earlier each evening. Looking back, those days wouldn't sound remarkable to anyone else. Nothing grand ever happened. No adventures worth printing in a paper. But for me, those were the days when the world felt most alive, when every hour had its own quiet rhythm. We didn't realize how special that simplicity was. We were too busy looking ahead, dreaming about growing up, getting out, chasing whatever came next. We didn't know how rare it was to have nowhere you needed to be, surrounded by folks who'd known you your whole life, breathing in air that smelled like rain and freshly turned dirt. One evening near the end of that summer, Grandpa took me down to the lake. The water was still as glass, the sky above it turning that deep amber color that only shows up at dusk. He told me he used to come there when he was a boy, long before the town built up around it. He skipped a flat stone, 1, 2, 3 ripples before it sank, and said, quiet as a prayer, "You don't get too many summers like this. Remember it. Don't let it slip away." I didn't understand what he meant then, but standing there beside him, frogs calling from the reeds, the air thick with pine and twilight, something in me knew that moment would never really leave. Years passed, as they always do. The summer started to feel shorter, or maybe I just got older. People moved on, roads widened, the nights grew quieter in ways that didn't feel the same. But every now and then, maybe when the light hits the trees just right, or when I hear a screen door slam somewhere down the street, I feel it again. That summer, I see Grandpa by the gate, Grandma at the clothesline, and me and my friends pedaling fast toward the horizon, chasing nothing but our own laughter. Back then, the world felt whole, like we were exactly where we were meant to be. And maybe, in a way, we still are. Because even as time pushes us forward, some places stay waiting. They live inside us, in the smell of cut grass, the hum of cicadas, the creak of an old porch board that sounds just the same as it did all those years ago. When I close my eyes, I can still feel that heat on the back of my neck. Still hear that far-off train whistle I never did see. The world changed 1,000 times since then. But those days, those long, golden afternoons, they never really ended. They just settled quietly into the corners of my memory, glowing soft and steady, like the last light of a summer evening that never quite fades. There are some things you don't mean to keep, and others you just can't bring yourself to let go. In our house, memories had a way of tucking themselves into corners. Between the pages of old cookbooks, inside coffee tins, behind picture frames. But most often, they ended up in the desk drawer beneath the window in the front room. That drawer had been there for as long as I could remember. It was narrow, a little stubborn to open, the wood swollen with age, the handle worn smooth from decades of use. Grandpa kept everything in there, spare screws, loose buttons, receipts for tools he never used, and letters. Always letters. After he passed, I found myself sitting in that same quiet room. Sunlight spilled through the lace curtain, turning the dust into tiny flecks of gold. The house didn't sound peaceful anymore. It sounded hollow, like it was holding its breath. I sat there for a long while before I finally reached for the drawer. It gave that same little groan as it slid open. Inside, everything was just as he'd left it. Neat in that way only old men seem to manage. The kind of order that looks like clutter to anyone else but somehow makes perfect sense to them. I sorted through the envelopes and receipts, each one soft and worn with time. Some were bills, others were notes from neighbors. And then, at the very bottom, I found a letter. The envelope was thin and yellowed, sealed but never stamped. Just one word written across it in his slow, careful handwriting. Eleanor. My grandmother's name. I just stared at it for a moment. The ink had faded to brown, the corners frayed like it had been held 1,000 times. My first thought was that it must have been something private, something he wrote but never sent. A message he couldn't bring himself to say out loud. I turned it over in my hands, feeling how light it was, light as a feather, but somehow heavy with everything it might hold. Finally, I opened it. The paper inside was fragile, creased and thin, his handwriting steady but a little uncertain, the kind of writing you do late at night when the world's gone still. It began simply, "My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to say what I should have more often. You always said I wasn't much for words, and you were right. But I hope you knew anyway, how much you were the heart of this place. Of me." I stopped for a second. The air felt different, still, almost sacred. Outside, a lawnmower hummed faintly in the distance. Birds chattered in the maple tree. It was like the world was holding still to listen. I kept reading. I still remember the day I first saw you at the fair. You had a ribbon in your hair and a lemon ice in your hand, and I thought no one had ever looked so alive. You laughed at something your sister said, and I swore that sound would follow me all my life. I was right about that. We built a whole world out of small things. Sunday dinners, clotheslines, quiet nights. I never needed much more than that. You gave me a life I couldn't have dreamed up on my own. If time had been kinder, I'd have told you more often that every morning with you was enough. And when I go, I hope it's in this house, with the scent of your bread in the air and the sound of you humming in the next room. That's how I want forever to feel. Yours always, Jay. By the time I finished reading, the sunlight had drifted across the floor, long and golden. I sat there with a letter in my hands, and for the first time since he'd gone, I didn't feel alone. Because in those words, So quiet, so simple. He was still here. I thought about Grandma then, how she'd sit at the table long after supper, tracing the rim of a teacup, lost in some faraway memory. Maybe she knew about the letter. Maybe she'd read it once, smiled soft, and tucked it back in that drawer for him to find again someday. Or maybe she never saw it at all. Maybe he wrote it just for himself, a way to keep her close when all he had left were words. Either way, it was theirs. And somehow, now, it was mine too. I folded it carefully and placed it back where I found it. I couldn't bring myself to keep it anywhere else. That old, stubborn drawer felt like the right kind of guardian. In the years since, I've written letters of my own. Not for anyone to read. Not yet, anyway. Just folded bits of paper tucked away in corners, for the days when words are the only thing that can hold what the heart remembers. And sometimes, when I pass that desk, I swear I can still feel them both there. Him by the window, her in the kitchen, sunlight stretching between them like a golden thread. Some loves don't fade. They just find quieter ways to stay. There was a willow tree that stood at the edge of our property, down past the clothesline in the vegetable garden, near where the creek curved behind the barn. Its branches hung low and heavy, brushing the earth like the fingers of an old friend. That tree had seen everything: storms, summers, laughter, and quiet tears. It was where we went when we didn't want to be found, or when we needed to remember something we couldn't quite put into words. Grandfather used to say the willow was planted by his father, back before the war. He said it grew strong because it knew how to bend. That's how willows survive. I didn't understand what he meant until much later in life, when I learned that the strongest hearts are often the ones that know how to bend too. When I was 12, I carved my initials into that tree, right beside his. The bark was cool beneath my hand, and I remember the smell, damp earth and sap and something green that felt alive. He didn't scold me for marking it. He just smiled and said, "Now we're both part of it." And we were, in some small, boyish way. I thought that made us eternal. It was under that same willow, years later, that he told me a story I never forgot. It was a hot evening, the kind where the air barely moved, and the crickets hadn't started yet. He was quieter than usual, his pipe resting unlit beside him. I could tell something was on his mind. He told me about a promise he made beneath that tree a lifetime ago, long before I was born. It was the summer he and Grandma got engaged. They didn't have much then, just each other and a dream that love would be enough to build a life on. He said they sat there one night, watching the fireflies drift over the water, and he told her, "No matter what happens, we'll always find our way back to this spot, even if it takes a lifetime." I asked him if they ever did. He smiled, the kind of smile that carried a whole story in it. "Every year," he said, "on the first night of summer, we'd come out here. Sometimes we'd dance, sometimes we'd just sit, but we never missed a year." I could picture it so I could see them so clearly, the two of them young again, barefoot in the grass, her dress catching the moonlight, his hand steady at her waist. I could almost hear their laughter, soft and easy, carried by the night air. Then his voice went quiet. "The last time we came out here," he said, "she was already sick, couldn't walk far, so I brought her down in the old chair. She held my hand the whole way. When we reached the tree, she looked up through the branches and said, 'We kept our promise.'" He stopped there, eyes far away, and I realized then that some memories aren't meant to be spoken, they are meant to be felt. He reached over, gave my shoulder a gentle pat, and said, "When you find someone who feels like home, don't ever take it for granted. Time's shorter than you think." That night stayed with me. The sound of the creek moving slow, the willow leaves whispering in the dark, the soft rasp of his voice. It all felt sacred somehow, like I'd been allowed to overhear a secret the world was keeping. Years later, after they were both gone, I went back to that spot. The willow had grown huge by then, its trunk split in a few places but still strong. Their initials were still there, faded, rough with age, but you could still read them. I traced them with my fingers, and for a moment, I swear I could feel them both there with me. Their laughter, their quiet presence, the echo of a promise that had outlived them. I sat there for a long time, listening to the leaves rustle overhead, and I thought about how promises aren't just words. They are places. They live in the things we build together, in trees, in houses, in songs, in memories that just won't fade. Before I left, I found a smooth stone by the creek and set it at the base of the willow. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The air felt alive with something bigger than language, something that felt like love and time and peace all tangled together. When I finally stood and looked back, the evening light had turned gold. The branches were swaying just enough to catch the wind. And I thought, maybe that old willow wasn't just bending after all. Maybe it was waving, a soft, slow goodbye. It's strange how you never recognize the day your life begins to change, not while it's happening. It's only years later, sitting alone with a cup of coffee gone cold, that you look back and realize, that was the moment. The one where everything quietly shifted, and you didn't even know enough to say goodbye. For us, that day came one September morning. The summer had thinned out into something softer, the air cooler, the sky clearer, the fields turning gold. School had just started again, and the sound of tractors drifted in from across the hills. Grandma was already in the kitchen, humming as she stirred the first pot of apple butter. Everything felt as ordinary as it ever had, which, somehow, made it unforgettable. Grandpa was out by the barn, patching a section of roof he'd been meaning to fix all season. I remember watching him from the porch, his silhouette against the rising sun, the easy rhythm of his movements, the way he'd pause to rest his back and look out over the land, like he always did. He seemed steady, eternal, almost. But that's the trick time plays on you. It makes you believe that always means forever. By noon, clouds had rolled in from the west, heavy and gray. I was down near the willow, skipping rocks across the creek, when I heard Grandma call my name. Not in her usual gentle way, but sharp, urgent. Something in her voice made me drop everything and run. When I reached the porch, she was gripping the doorframe with one hand, the other pressed to her chest. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "It's your grandfather," she said. Just 3 words, but the kind that rearranged the air around you. He'd fallen from the roof. By the time I got to him, he was sitting upright against the barn wall, one hand clutching his side, the other waving off our worry. "Just lost my footing," he said, forcing a smile. But even then, I saw the strain in his eyes, the sweat on his forehead that had nothing to do with the heat. We got him inside. He insisted on sitting in his chair by the window, said he just needed to catch his breath. Grandma fussed, but he squeezed her hand and told her to rest. I stood in the doorway, helpless. It's a strange thing, watching someone who's always been the anchor of your world look suddenly fragile, like realizing the ocean can go still. He didn't say much the rest of that day. The doctor came, said it was a broken rib, maybe 2, and that he needed rest. We tried to believe it was that simple, but something in the house had shifted. The air felt heavier, as if even the walls understood what we didn't want to say. For weeks, he stayed in that chair by the window, looking out toward the gate. Sometimes he'd hum, or ask about the weather, or tell me to fetch the mail even though I already had. Mostly, though, he'd just watch the light move across the yard, morning to afternoon, afternoon to dusk, as if he were memorizing it. One evening, I sat with him there. The sun was low, and the fields glowed the color of old brass. He turned to me and said, "You know, there's a season for everything, even the things we think will never end." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. He smiled faintly, as if that was enough. That was the last real conversation we ever had. A few mornings later, I came down to find Grandma already awake, sitting beside him. He looked peaceful, his hands folded neatly in his lap, his pipe resting on the windowsill. The light was just beginning to touch the curtains, and the house was so still it felt like time itself had stopped to listen. There are moments that divide a life in two, before and after. That was mine. The world outside didn't change. The birds still sang. The gate still creaked. The radio still played the same old songs. But inside, everything was quieter. The porch felt larger without him there. The evenings stretched longer, and the silence had a sound all its own. That afternoon, I walked out to the willow, just to breathe. The air smelled of rain, and the leaves whispered softly, like they were telling me something I wasn't ready to hear. I sat on the ground and thought about the promise he'd made beneath those same branches, that he and Grandma would always find their way back there, even if it took a lifetime. And I wondered, maybe that's what he'd done. Maybe he'd simply gone ahead, keeping the promise in the only way he could. That night, the sky broke open with rain. I stood on the porch, watching it fall in silver sheets, the smell of wet earth rising through the air. And for the first time, I understood that grief doesn't always come as sorrow. Sometimes, it comes as stillness, a strange, aching peace that whispers, he was here, he mattered, and that's enough.
I didn't go back for a long time. Not because I didn't want to, I just didn't know how. When someone you love fills a place so completely, it's hard to walk through it without expecting to see them there. Every creak in the floor, every worn patch on the porch, it all feels like theirs. Life carried me along, the way it does. Quiet, steady. I went off to college, landed a job up north, got married, raised kids. The world kept getting faster, louder, brighter. But a part of me never left that old house. Some piece of me stayed right there at the edge of the yard, watching the wind move through the tall grass, waiting for Grandpa to wave me in for supper. It wasn't until my own hair had gone silver and my kids had kids that I finally decided to go back. It was a late autumn afternoon when I turned onto that familiar gravel road, the one that curved past the creek and wound its way up toward the hills. The air had that cool, wood smoke sweetness you only get in October. The trees were blazing gold, rust, amber, their leaves falling slow and easy, like they weren't in any rush to let go. The closer I got, the quieter the world became. The hum of the tires softened, the radio faded down to a whisper. And then, there it was. The gate. Same old wooden posts, weathered and grey, still standing guard at the edge of the lane. The latch was rusty, the top hinge sagged a little, but it was still there. I pulled over and just sat for a while, letting the stillness settle over me. When I finally stepped out, the wind carried 1,000 tiny memories, the smell of cut hay, the call of crows somewhere off in the trees, that faint sweetness of apples from a forgotten orchard. I ran my hand over the gate, tracing the grooves my grandfather carved so long ago. His initials were still there, WBH, William Benjamin Hart, faint but steady, carved deep enough to outlast us all. When I pushed the gate open, it gave that same long, slow creak I remembered. For a second, I could almost see him standing there again, leaning against the post, smiling like he'd been waiting for me this whole time. The path to the house was overgrown with grass, and the paint had peeled in places, but the shape of it, the bones of it, was still the same. The porch swing hung crooked, one chain gone, and the old rocking chair sat empty beside the door. The windows were cloudy with dust, but through them, I could almost see the life that once filled those rooms, morning light, coffee brewing, laughter spilling out of the kitchen. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was cool and heavy, carrying that old scent of wood, dust, and time. My footsteps echoed soft across the floorboards. Every corner seemed to hold a story. The clock on the mantel had stopped at 3:17. The table by the window still showed the faint ring from Grandpa's coffee cup. Even the hat rack leaned just a little, the way it always had after brushing against his shoulder all those years. I sat down in his old chair. The cushion was flat now, the fabric worn to the color of dry wheat. But the view out that window, looking over the yard and the far-off trees, hadn't changed a bit. Same gentle slope. Same wind whispering through the grass. Same stretch of sky that seemed to go on forever. I don't know how long I sat there, just breathing it in. It didn't feel like visiting a place. It felt like coming home to a part of myself I'd left behind. I remembered something he used to say, land remembers us, even when we forget it. And sitting there, I realized he was right. The house hadn't forgotten. The earth hadn't. And maybe, just maybe, neither had I. As the sun started to dip, I walked out to the willow. It had grown even taller, its branches thicker and darker, the leaves moving in that slow, familiar way. The stones we'd placed around it were still there, smooth and worn, marking the little treasures we'd buried as kids, a marble, a pocket knife, a rusted locket. I knelt and brushed the dirt away, half expecting to feel the heartbeat of those summers beneath my fingertips. And then I saw it, a small tin box, half buried in the roots. Took a little work to free it, but when I did, I found an old photograph wrapped in brittle paper. It was them, Grandpa and Grandma, standing by the porch, arms around each other, smiling at something just out of frame. The gate behind them stood open. On the back, written in her looping handwriting, were 4 words: "We're still waiting, love." For the first time in years, something lifted inside me, a piece I didn't know I'd been missing. I sat there until the last of the daylight faded and the stars started peeking through the dark. When I finally walked back to the truck, I looked once more at the gate. The wind moved through it, singing that same old tune it always had. And I thought, maybe this is what home really is. Not the walls, not the fields, not even the people who once filled them. It's the feeling that waits for you, patient, steady, no matter how far you've gone or how long it takes to return. I closed the latch behind me, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the ache of leaving. I felt gratitude, quiet, simple, whole. Because in its own way, the wind through that old gate was saying exactly what I needed to hear: you made it back. Night settled over the old house, soft and slow, like someone laying a quilt across my shoulders. The last orange trace of sunset slipped behind the fields, and that deep country quiet crept in. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that hums, full of small, living sounds. The settling of the wood. The sigh of wind brushing the eaves. The faint tick of a clock that hadn't worked in years. I sat by the window in Grandpa's old chair, watching the first stars blink awake. They came shy at first, 1 or 2 at a time, until the sky looked like it had freckles again. The house around me felt alive, breathing, remembering, listening. And somewhere in that stillness, I could almost hear him. Not in any ghostly way, but in that quiet, familiar way memories talk when you finally sit still long enough to listen. It was there, in the rhythm of the floorboards, in the way the wind leaned against the shutters. I could almost catch the sound of his laugh, that low, rolling chuckle that always started in his chest. I could hear the scrape of his boots on the porch, his humming while he worked the gate, that little throat clear he'd do before saying something he wanted to stick. He wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke, you remembered it. And that night, sitting there in the half-dark, one of his old sayings came back to me, clear as day: "You can't keep time from moving, boy, but you can choose how to carry it." Back then, I didn't get it. But now, sitting in the house he built with his own hands, I finally did. Time doesn't really take things from us, it just changes how we hold them. What used to be a moment becomes a memory, and if you treat it gentle, it stays bright. It becomes something you can set down beside you on a quiet night and still feel the warmth of. I wandered through the house, touching the walls, the shelves, the things left behind. The air was cool and smelled faintly of cedar and old books. His workbench still sat by the window, tools rusting but waiting, like they thought he might come back. A faded flannel hung from its hook, soft and tired from years of wear. Then I saw a small wooden box on the dresser, the kind he used to keep screws and nails in. Only this time, it held something else. A folded note, yellowed and thin, written in his hand. Just a few lines: "If you're reading this, I reckon you've come home. Don't mourn the silence, listen to it. You'll find us in there somewhere. WBH." I stood there a long time, holding that note. My throat got tight, but it wasn't from sadness. It was something deeper, something like gratitude. Like awe. That kind of quiet understanding that love doesn't vanish, it just moves to another room. I sat at the old kitchen table, the one we used for supper when I was a kid. I could see him setting his hat on the same hook every night, Grandma humming while she dried the dishes, cicadas singing through the open window while the radio played low. The world had felt so big back then, and I'd felt so small. Now it felt smaller, softer, but somehow more sacred. As I sat there, I started hearing other echoes too: Grandma's laughter, the porch swing creaking, bits of old conversations floating just out of reach. They weren't loud or clear, just small fragments brushing against the moment. And that's when it hit me: we never really stop hearing the ones we've loved. Their voices just settle deeper inside us, until they become part of the silence itself. Before bed, I went out to the porch. The night was cool and still, dew already starting to gather on the grass. The stars over the hills looked closer than they used to. I leaned against the railing and closed my eyes. The crickets sang slow and steady, and somewhere in the rustle of the willow leaves, I could have sworn I heard that same old voice, low and patient, say, "You did good, son. You found your way back." And just like that, peace settled in, slow, certain, complete. The kind of peace you don't have to hang on to, because it hangs on to you. Inside, the house waited not as a relic, but as a keeper of echoes. Every board, every shadow, every soft whisper of wind seemed to say the same thing: we're still here. We never left. And maybe that's the truth of it, people don't really disappear when they go. They just linger in the places that loved them most. And when the wind moves through those places, when it breathes across a gate, or through an old willow, their voices come back. Gentle. Familiar. Forever near. The years after that visit slipped by like the pages of an old photo album, quiet, steady, and not in any hurry to be noticed. I went back home that autumn, but the house never really left me. I carried it around in the corners of my mind, like a little lantern I could light whenever the world felt too fast, too loud, or just plain worn out. Funny thing about time, the older you get, the softer it gets around the edges. The sharp moments, the goodbyes, the mistakes, the regrets, they all lose their bite. They just sort of smooth out. Looking back now, I realize life isn't one long story. It's a bunch of small seasons, each one rolling into the next before you even notice it's changed. There were springs full of laughter when my grandkids tore through the yard chasing fireflies the way I once did. Summers that smelled like cut grass and grilled corn, thick with warmth and memory. Autumns with that same golden hush I remembered from the farm, the kind that makes the whole world slow down and breathe. And winters, soft and still, when I'd sit by the window with a hot cup of tea, watching the snow fall quiet over the fields, like the earth was sleeping and dreaming of spring. Every now and then, I'd find myself back at the old house. Not every year, but often enough that the path seemed to remember my footsteps. I'd wander through the rooms, feeling the sunlight stretch across the floorboards just like it used to. The paint kept peeling, the wood kept aging, but it didn't feel sad. It felt right. Like the place and I were growing old together, both of us wearing our years with a kind of easy grace. One year, I brought my granddaughter along. She was about 10, all curiosity and wonder, asking 100 questions a minute. When we reached the gate, she ran her hand over the weathered wood and asked, "Did you really grow up here, Grandpa?" I smiled and told her I did. She looked around the hills, the tall grass, the willow swaying off in the distance, and said quietly, "It feels like it remembers you." I laughed, but she wasn't wrong. The air around that place did seem to recognize me, the wind, the light, even the far-off call of a crow. It all felt like a quiet kind of welcome. And that's when it hit me, memory doesn't just live in people. It lives in the ground, in the things we've touched, in the spaces where love once settled. Maybe that's what makes home feel like home, not the walls or the windows, but the invisible things that stay behind. We spent the afternoon exploring. She found the old porch swing and gave it a brave push. It squeaked in protest, but it still held strong. We sat under the willow, and I showed her where I used to bury my treasures, old marbles, buttons, and little scraps of paper that said things like, "Today was a good day." Her laughter carried through the yard, bright and easy, and for a moment it felt like time folded in on itself, like my childhood and hers were happening side by side. When the sun dipped low and the air turned cool, she asked, "Do you miss him? Your grandpa?" I told her the truth, that I used to miss him like something lost. But now, I just feel him everywhere. In the wind. In the light coming through the leaves. In the way that old gate still creaks open, just the same as it did when I was little. She nodded, thoughtful, quiet, then said, "That's good. Then he's not gone." On the drive back, the sky turned the color of honey, and I thought about all the seasons that had come and gone, not just mine, but the ones before me. My grandfather's. My grandmother's. My parents'. All of them flowing together like a long, slow river. And I realized no season ever really ends. It just changes form. Becomes a story, a lesson, a piece of who we are. The years kept rolling on. My hair went from silver to white, my hands slower but steadier. And every new season started to feel like a small gift I got to unwrap one more time. Some evenings, I'd sit out on my porch, watching the sunset stretch across the sky. The wind would move through the trees in that same old way, soft, familiar, full of memory. And in that sound, I'd hear him again, my grandfather's voice, warm and patient, saying, "You did all right, boy. You did just fine." That's the thing about time, it takes plenty from you, sure, but it gives, too. It gives you wisdom, kindness, and the grace to see beauty even in the fading of things. I used to think life was about holding on. Now I know it's about learning how to let go gently, with faith and trusting that what's meant to stay will always find its way back, carried on the wind like the echo of a voice that never really left. It's funny how time teaches you things. It never shouts, never demands you pay attention, it just keeps walking beside you, dropping little lessons along the way. Most of the time, you don't even notice until years later, when you finally sit still long enough for memory to start talking. I've learned that life isn't some straight, smooth road. It twists, loops back, takes detours you don't expect. The places you think you've left behind, somehow, they find their way back, softened by time, carrying meanings you couldn't see before. When I was young, I used to think wisdom came all at once, like the sunrise spilling over the hills. But now I know it comes more like twilight, slow, gentle, brushing everything with gold before it fades into quiet understanding. The old house taught me that. So did the land, and the people who walked it before me. Each one, in their own way, showed me what it really means to live not through grand moments, but through the small ones. A cup of coffee on the porch. Rain tapping on the roof. The simple kindnesses that never make it into photos but stay tucked inside your heart. When I was younger, I chased everything: success, belonging, the picture of what a good life was supposed to look like. But now I see it different. A good life isn't something you chase, it's something you tend, like a garden. You pull a few weeds, water the roots, and trust the seasons to do the rest. Some things bloom, others fade, but it's all part of it. All of it matters. One afternoon, I was sitting by the window with my granddaughter. She was older then, getting ready to head off to college. She asked me what it felt like growing older. I told her the truth. It feels a lot like walking down a familiar road at dusk. The world gets softer, quieter, and you start hearing things you used to miss. You don't rush anymore. You listen to the wind, to the birds, to the echoes of your own life. And the older you get, the more thankful you are just to still be walking. She asked if I ever wished I could go back. I smiled and said, sure, sometimes. But not to change anything, just to see it again. To feel that sunlight one more time. She nodded, and I could tell she got it, even if she hadn't lived enough years yet to feel it all the way. The truth is, we spend the first half of life collecting things, people, dreams, experiences, and the second half learning how to let them go without losing what they meant. That's the quiet art of aging with grace, realizing that love doesn't fade when things change. It just shifts shape. It gets lighter, freer, easier to carry. I still think of my grandfather often. His voice shows up in the strangest moments, when I'm walking through the yard, when sunlight hits the fields just right, or when my granddaughter laughs. He used to tell me, every day teaches you something, even if you don't see it yet. Took me a lifetime to really understand how true that was. Looking back now, I can see how all those little moments added up: the laughter, the mistakes, the quiet mornings, the porch evenings. None of them felt big at the time, but together, they became the story of my life. Maybe that's what we're all doing, piecing together small moments until they form something whole. A mosaic, made not of perfection, but of presence. These days, when I visit the old house, I don't feel that ache anymore. I sit by the gate, listen to the wind, and it feels like sitting with an old friend. The seasons keep turning, they always have, and I've learned there's beauty in that rhythm. Time doesn't really take from us. It just reshapes what love leaves behind. If I've learned one thing, it's this: what we love becomes part of who we are. The people, the places, the memories, they don't disappear. They settle into us quietly, and we carry them forward without even noticing. So I don't fight the years anymore. I welcome them. Every wrinkle, every silver hair, every slow morning, they're proof I've lived enough to understand what matters. And when I watch the sun sink behind the hills, I finally get what my grandfather meant when he said, "The best things in life don't stay, they return." Every time the wind moves, every time the light shifts, every time you remember. And so, I do. I remember not with sadness, but with gratitude. Because every season, every lesson, and every bit of love I've known is still here, quiet as the wind through that old gate, steady as time itself. It was late spring when I went back again. One of those days where the air feels soft enough to touch and the sunlight drifts through the trees like a half-remembered dream. The road leading to the house hadn't changed a bit, winding and calm, lined with wildflowers that swayed like they were saying, "Welcome home." This time, I wasn't alone. My daughter was driving, and my granddaughter sat in the back, all grown now, steady in her own way. She had that quiet kind of confidence young folks carry, the kind that doesn't yet know how time turns it into tenderness later on. As we rolled down the old gravel lane, I could almost feel the years folding back. Not in a sad way, more like the past was smiling at me, whispering, "You made it back." The gate came into view, weathered, leaning, but still standing tall. My grandfather's initials were still carved into the wood, worn shallow by rain and time but not gone. That made me grin. Some things, I guess, are just too loved to disappear. We stopped the car, and my granddaughter was the first one out. She ran her hand along the gate the way I had when I was her age. "It's smaller than I remember," she said, and I chuckled. "No, sweetheart," I told her, "you're just taller now." The air smelled of lilacs, and somewhere beyond the hill, a lawnmower hummed, life still moving along, steady and familiar. I walked up the path toward the house, slower than I used to, but without that old ache in my chest. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt settled, at peace with its place in the long story of things. Inside, the sunlight poured through the windows, catching little dust motes as they floated by. The floorboards creaked under our feet, that same comforting sound I'd known all my life. My daughter stood in the doorway, quiet, taking it all in. My granddaughter wandered through each room like she was touching history, tracing her fingers along picture frames, faded wallpaper, and the memories still living there. Then she found it, the photograph. The one I'd discovered years back, my grandparents standing by the porch. She held it carefully and asked, "Were they happy?" I smiled, watching the light hit the edge of the frame. "Yeah," I said. "They didn't have much, but they had each other. That was enough." She studied their faces for a moment, then said softly, "It feels warm, like they're still here." And she was right. In that moment, I could feel it, their love hadn't stayed in the past. It had just changed hands, living on in her kindness, her curiosity, the way she noticed the light. We went out to the willow after that. It had grown wider with age, its branches hanging low like the curtain of an old memory. The ground beneath it was soft and cool. I showed her the spot where I'd buried my childhood treasures, that old tin box I once thought the world of. She smiled and said, "Can I leave something too?" I nodded. She reached into her bag and pulled out a little silver charm, a tiny heart on a chain. Then she knelt down and placed it gently in the soil, right by the roots. "For the next ones," she said quietly. That simple act hit me deep. The way she wanted to give something forward, to leave a bit of kindness waiting for someone else, it caught me off guard. My eyes stung, but it wasn't sadness. It was that feeling you get when life comes full circle, when you realize nothing really ends, it just keeps on living through someone else. We sat beneath the willow for a while, just listening. The breeze moved through the fields, bending the grass into soft waves. I closed my eyes and let it brush across my face, that same familiar wind that once carried my grandfather's laughter. For the first time, it didn't sound far away. It felt close. Alive. When we finally left, I didn't look back right away. I wanted to hold it inside me, not as something gone, but as something that still lived in me. But just before we turned down the road, I glanced at the gate one more time. The sunlight hit it just right, and for a moment, I could almost see them, two faint figures on the porch, standing side by side, smiling like they always did. "Goodbye," I whispered. But it didn't feel like goodbye anymore. It felt like a conversation that would keep going, through wind, through memory, through love, long after I was gone. Because that's what family really is. Not just the ones who stand beside you, but the ones who keep living through you. Their voices may fade from the air, but never from your heart. And as we drove away, with the sun dipping low and the fields glowing gold, I realized something simple and true. Everything I'd ever loved, every laugh, every lesson, every creak of that old porch, none of it ever really left me. It had just been waiting for this moment, for me to bring it home again. Evening found me back home that night, sitting on my own porch, not so different from the one I grew up with. The boards here are newer, the swing doesn't creak like the old one did, but somehow, it still feels the same. There's a rhythm to porches, you know? A kind of heartbeat made of quiet. A place where time softens around the edges. The sun was setting low, painting the fields in gold and rose. Light spilled across the railing and caught the wind chimes by the door, setting them to a slow, easy song. I leaned back, let it all wash over me. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the ache of what was gone. I just felt grateful for what had been, and what still is. My granddaughter sat beside me, legs tucked under her, sipping lemonade. She had that easy calm that reminded me of her mother, and if I'm honest, a little bit of myself back in the day. She asked me about the old times, the smell of hay in summer, the sound of rain on a tin roof, how my granddad used to whistle while he worked. I answered each question slow and easy, letting the memories roll out like an old song I still knew all the words to. As we talked, the light began to fade. Fireflies blinked to life among the lilacs, little lanterns dancing in the dusk. And it hit me, these small glowing moments, they're what make a life. Not the big occasions or milestones, but evenings like this, shared between generations under the same fading sky. When the porch light flickered on, casting its warm circle across the steps, I felt something deep and certain. The same light that once burned at my grandfather's house was shining here too. Different bulb, same meaning, someone's home, you're safe, you're welcome. I told my granddaughter about that old porch light, how it guided us home from down the lane, how no matter how late it got, you could always spot its glow through the trees. She smiled and said, like it's waiting for you. I nodded. Yeah, exactly that. She leaned against my shoulder, and for a while, we just sat in silence. The cicadas were singing, the air smelled faintly of honeysuckle, and the day slipped softly into night. There was no sadness in it, just a peaceful knowing that everything beautiful eventually becomes memory. And memory, in its own way, is just another kind of home. I thought of the old gate again, weathered, patient, still standing. I thought of my grandfather beside it, tall and kind, his voice in my mind saying, keep the light on, no matter what. And I have. Through loss, through change, through all the years that came and went, I've kept it burning. There's a comfort in knowing that when I'm gone, someone else will keep it lit. Maybe my daughter. Maybe my granddaughter. Maybe someone I'll never meet. The light will keep shining, not out of habit, but because that's what love does. It keeps going. Quietly. Faithfully. Lighting the way home for whoever comes next. The sky deepened into indigo, stars waking up one by one. My granddaughter pointed out the first one she saw and whispered a wish I couldn't quite hear. I smiled and made one of my own, not for more years or time, but simply for the light to keep glowing. Later, when the house went still, I stood to turn off the porch light. But something stopped me. I looked at that golden glow spilling across the steps and thought of all the nights it had watched over us, all the hellos, goodbyes, and quiet in-betweens. So I left it on. Not because I forgot, but because I was thankful. Every porch needs its light, a quiet promise against the dark, a reminder that someone's heart still remembers the way home. As I stepped inside, I paused, listening to the night settle into the hum of crickets, the sigh of the wind, the gentle breathing of a world at rest. The porch light still burned, steady and warm. It wasn't just light anymore. It was legacy. It was love. The house is quiet now. The kind of quiet that doesn't ache, it just is. The air's cooler, and a soft chorus of crickets drifts in from the field. Somewhere out there, a dog barks once, then fades back into the stillness. I sit by the window with a cup of tea cooling in my hands. The porch light glows faintly through the glass, and I watch it for a long time. The way it reaches into the dark feels almost like company. There was a time I used to fear growing old, afraid of what might fade, what might slip away. But not anymore. Now I see that aging isn't losing, it's remembering deeper. It's carrying the light forward. The photos on the mantel shimmer in the lamplight, my grandfather's rough hands, my parents on their wedding day, my daughter as a little girl holding a wildflower she refused to let go of. Each one a heartbeat from a different time. I smile, not out of sorrow, but gratitude. I've had my full share of days. Some bright, some dim, all mine. Outside, the night deepens. The chimes on the porch sway with the wind, playing that slow, tender tune that only evening knows. I think about the stories we tell, how they outlive us, how even when our voices fade, the memories hang in the air like the scent of lilacs long after spring is gone. Maybe that's what eternity really is, not endless time, but love remembered. I close my eyes and see the old gate again. I can almost hear it creak open, the way it did when my grandfather came in from the fields. He'd hang his hat on the same nail, pour himself a glass of sweet tea, and say, "Another day well spent." I used to laugh at that. I didn't get it then, how ordinary days could be well spent. But now I do. Turns out, the ordinary ones were the sacred ones all along. My granddaughter's laughter drifts from upstairs, soft, happy, alive. It reminds me that life doesn't end, it just changes hands. The light that guided me will guide her too, same porch, same stars, same easy rhythm of a summer night settling in. Soon, I'll turn off the lamp, finish my tea, and let the stillness take over. But not yet. For now, I'll just sit here a little longer, watching the way the porch light touches the steps, soft, golden, unwavering. It's enough, just being here. Breathing in the quiet. Surrounded by all the moments that made a life. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle drifts across the dark, low and lonely, like a memory calling out to itself. It fades slow, swallowed by the night. I smile. Tomorrow will come, like it always does. The sun will rise over these same fields, lighting the old gate, the same porch, the same tender world that keeps on turning. And someone will sit here again someday, maybe years from now, feeling the same peace I feel tonight. The light outside will still be glowing. The crickets will still hum. The stories will still whisper through the rafters. And that'll be enough. Because some things, love, memory, home, they don't end. They just settle quietly into the evening.